Behind the glittering lights of the Grand Ole Opry, a silent storm has been raging for decades. One woman has finally decided to tell the story no one else dared to speak. Her name is Jeannie Seely. To most of the world, she's the radiant, sequined performer whose soulful voice brought comfort, joy, and tears to generations of country music lovers. But at 90 years old, Jeannie no longer feels bound to the silence that once protected the powerful. For the first time, she's sharing the reality hidden behind the curtain, a world where women were silenced, undermined, and quietly erased, no matter how brightly they shined on stage. She isn't doing this to stir scandal or seek revenge. She's doing it because the truth, no matter how late it comes, deserves to be heard. And for every woman who is told her memories were exaggerations, her emotions too fragile, or her complaints too disruptive, Jeannie's voice now rises with clarity and quiet power. What happens when someone who's been quiet for too long finally speaks? And how many more stories remain buried under the weight of applause? The woman America loved for her wit, charm, and stage presence was also someone who lived in the shadows of manipulation and fear. While fans saw a sparkling gown and a dazzling smile, they didn't see the subtle sabotage or the weight of whispered threats that haunted her between performances. For years, Jeannie carried that weight alone, choosing to wear grace like armor while carefully hiding the truth beneath layers of silence. But she wasn't just enduring, she was documenting. In the quiet moments between shows and in the stillness of lonely hotel rooms, Jeannie sat at a clunky old typewriter, slowly pressing each key with trembling fingers, committing every injustice to paper. It wasn't just a release. It was preservation. With each story, each incident, she created a silent rebellion, written evidence of a system designed to make women disappear while smiling in public. That evidence lived for decades in a small shoebox beneath her bed, wrapped in a red scarf once given to her by her mother, as if to protect the fragile truth inside. It held stories of microphones that mysteriously died just before her biggest performances, meeting invitations she never received but was later accused of skipping, and conversations so chilling in their implications they sounded like fiction. She called that box her insurance policy. It was never meant to be opened unless it had to be. And for years, she feared she might take those secrets with her to the grave. But the fire in 1991 changed everything. That fire was not just physical, it was symbolic. When her home caught ablaze, Jeannie believed her truths, her memories, her entire secret archive had turned to ash. Watching from outside as flames swallowed years of her life, she felt a loss so profound it seemed like a second betrayal. But in an almost surreal twist of fate, when firefighters sifted through the ruins, they found the shoebox, scorched, blackened, but unbroken. The lock was damaged, but the papers inside had survived, untouched by fire. That moment marked a turning point for Jeannie. The universe had intervened. Her story refused to be silenced. What she had written in isolation now burned with a new purpose, not as fuel for bitterness, but as a call for truth. As she read through those charred but legible pages, she realized she hadn't been living a dream. She had been surviving one. Every dazzling stage moment came at a cost the audience never saw. The voices of women like Jeannie weren't just dismissed, they were erased. Her resilience became a quiet protest, her silence a carefully measured choice. And then, years later, another twist arrived, not from the fire this time, but from the knock on her door by a young woman carrying a folder and 100 questions. A graduate student, curious and sincere, wanted to learn about the forgotten women of country music. At first, Jeannie was ready to brush her off. But then the student uttered two haunting words, "Room 6B." And suddenly, time stopped. Those words, so small, so harmless to anyone else, held the power to crack the decades-long wall Jeannie had built around one of the most painful moments of her life. The student had found an old letter buried deep in the Opry's technical archives, misfiled, yellowed, and nearly forgotten. In it, Jeannie described an encounter in a room that was never meant to exist, a space where she'd once faced something so frightening and personal she had tried to erase it from memory. The letter ended with a chilling line. "If I speak of this again, I will be removed from the stage before I finish my next verse." The girl's eyes filled with concern as she read it aloud. For Jeannie, hearing her own words echo back was like opening an old wound. But it was also a moment of recognition, of proof that she hadn't imagined it. That room 6B, with its hum, its boot-shaped stain on the ceiling, its brass doorknob, and its eerie silence, had existed. And someone had tried very hard to hide it. The student came back with more than questions. She brought a photograph from 1974, grainy and obscure, but there it was, the door to room 6B. The plaque. The handle. The hallway. Everything Jeannie remembered. The room had been sealed off and bricked over years ago, erased from floor plans, denied in records, as if it had never existed. But it had. And Jeannie had been there. The room represented more than an architectural oddity. It symbolized everything wrong with how women were treated, forced into silence, into spaces meant to intimidate and isolate, then erased when they became inconvenient. The memory took her back to a stormy night in 1971. Rain soaked the sidewalks outside the Opry as thunder growled overhead. Someone had slipped her a folded note, marked with just a time and the words 6B. She had never seen that room before. It didn't appear on any map, and no one ever mentioned it. But curiosity pulled her down the hall, past the places she knew, into a quiet part of the building where the air felt thick and expectant. When she opened the door, she was met with a silence that pressed against her skin. A man sat alone. He said almost nothing, except for one question, a question so invasive, so cruel in its simplicity, that Jeannie never repeated it. She stayed there only 11 minutes, but those minutes fractured something inside her. Later that night, she burned her favorite blue gown, the one she'd worn on stage just hours earlier. From that day forward, she never wore blue again. The industry didn't need to fire her. It just made her invisible. Her name slowly disappeared from schedules, her songs faded from rotation, and her presence became a whisper. But Jeannie didn't disappear. Instead, she wrote. She poured her anguish into lyrics that sounded sweet but hid sharp edges. Her songs spoke truths that couldn't be said out loud. And in doing so, she became a quiet warrior in an industry that didn't know what to do with women who refused to play along.
Her wardrobe changed.
Her lyrics deepened. Her smiles thinned. But she stayed. She watched as other women, Naomi Judd, Dottie West, Loretta Lynn, Patsy Cline, Skeeter Davis, faced similar dismissals and erasures, their stories rewritten or ignored, their contributions downplayed. But Jeannie remembered. She documented. She stored it all: names, dates, conversations, microaggressions, and outright threats. And she kept that shoebox as her record of what really happened behind the sparkle and applause. When she quietly published her memoir years later, it sent tremors through the industry. Some longtime figures quietly retired. Others denied, deflected, or claimed memory lapses. But the story was out, and it couldn't be undone. Today, Jeannie lives outside of Nashville, in a quiet space far from the spotlight. Her body may be slower, her days quieter, but her voice is clear, deliberate, and unshakable. When asked about her years at the Opry, she doesn't flinch. She simply says, "I gave you my best years. You gave me your rules. I outlived them." Her portrait still hangs backstage, not because anyone insists on honoring her, but because removing it would mean acknowledging the truth she told. She has become something far greater than a singer. She is a keeper of truth, a guardian of stories too heavy for others to carry. Younger artists now write her letters, thanking her for her strength, for staying, for speaking, for remembering. Jeannie Seely's greatest legacy is not just her music, though that alone would have made her a legend. It's the strength she showed in holding on to the truth, even when it hurt.
She chose to survive. She chose to speak.
And in doing so, she became a voice not only for herself, but for the countless women who never got the chance. Her story reminds us that silence may feel safer, but truth is what heals. The secrets locked in that shoebox were never just hers. They were all of ours. waiting for someone brave enough to finally say them out loud. If this story moved you, if Jeannie's courage and honesty struck a chord, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We bring you more real stories, just like this, from the voices that refuse to stay silent. Your support helps keep their truths alive.